David walked through the crowded streets of Bangkok, his heart heavy with grief. It had been 8 months since his wife passed away from cancer, and the emptiness in his life felt overwhelming. He was a successful software company owner, but all the money in the world couldn't fill the void she left behind. His friend Jake had suggested this trip to Thailand, saying he needed to get away from everything familiar. But instead of finding peace, David found himself wandering aimlessly through the city, feeling more lost than ever. That evening, Jake mentioned something that made David's blood run cold. He talked about underground places where desperate people gathered, places where terrible things happened to innocent victims. Jake wasn't suggesting David get involved, but rather warning him about the dark side of the city they were visiting. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about all the news stories he'd read about people being forced into terrible situations against their will. The thought of someone suffering while he lived in comfort made him feel sick. The next day, driven by something he couldn't explain, David found himself in a part of the city he'd never seen before. The buildings were old and run down, and the streets felt dangerous. He knew he shouldn't be there, but something pushed him forward. He ended up in a warehouse where a crowd had gathered. The atmosphere was tense and secretive. David realized he had stumbled into exactly the kind of place Jake had warned him about. His first instinct was to leave immediately, but then he saw her. She was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, sitting quietly in the corner. Her clothes were simple and worn, and she kept her eyes down, but there was something about her that caught David's attention. Despite everything, she carried herself with a strange kind of dignity that seemed out of place in such a horrible situation. David's heart broke looking at her. He thought about his own daughter who was studying abroad in college. What if something like this happened to her? What if she needed someone to help her and no one cared enough to try? Without really thinking it through, David made a decision that would change everything. He approached the person running the auction and made an offer. His hands shook as he handed over the money, knowing he was participating in something terrible, but hoping he could at least save one person from a worse fate. The woman looked up at him with tired eyes that held no hope. She didn't speak, didn't react, just followed him quietly when he gestured for her to come with him. David felt like he was going to be sick, but he forced himself to stay calm for her sake and took a taxi back to his hotel in silence. David had booked a suite with 2 bedrooms, and he quickly prepared the second room for her. He left clean clothes, food, and water by the door, then retreated to his own room to give her space. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall, wondering what he had just done. Had he made things better or worse? He had no idea how to help someone who had been through such trauma. He wasn't a counselor or a social worker. He was just a man who missed his wife and couldn't stand the thought of someone else suffering. Hours passed. David ordered room service and left a tray of food outside her door, knocking gently to let her know it was there. He didn't expect any response, and he didn't get one. As the night grew late, David lay in bed, unable to sleep. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He had probably broken several laws, and he had no idea what to do next. Should he contact the authorities? Should he try to get her help? What if she didn't want his help at all? Just as he was starting to drift off, he heard something that made his blood freeze. It was a whisper so quiet he almost missed it, but the words were clear, spoken in perfect English with an accent that sounded educated and refined. "I was a princess once." David sat up in bed, his heart racing. Had he really heard that, or was his tired mind playing tricks on him? The voice didn't match what he expected. It wasn't the voice of someone who belonged in that warehouse. It was the voice of someone who had once lived a very different life. He got up quietly and moved closer to the door between their rooms. He waited, hoping to hear more, but there was only silence. Yet those 5 words echoed in his mind over and over again. A princess, what did that mean? Was she speaking literally, or was it some kind of metaphor? David's mind raced with possibilities, each one more troubling than the last. He realized that this woman's story was far more complicated than he had imagined. She wasn't just another victim of circumstance. She was someone who had fallen from a great height, someone who had lost everything. As David finally fell asleep near dawn, he knew that his life had taken a turn he never could have predicted. He had come to Bangkok to escape his grief, but instead he had found a mystery that would consume him completely. The woman in the next room held secrets that could change everything, and whether he was ready or not, David was about to become part of a story much bigger and more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. David barely slept that first night. Those 5 words kept repeating in his mind. I was a princess once. When morning came, he found the food tray exactly where he had left it, untouched. His heart sank. Knowing she probably didn't trust anything, he offered. He knocked gently on her door. "I'm going to leave some fresh food here," he said softly. "You don't have to eat it, but it's there if you want it." Again, no response. But this time, when he checked an hour later, the food was gone. It became their routine. David would leave meals by her door, speak a few gentle words, and give her space. He never pushed, never demanded answers. He had read enough about trauma to know that trust couldn't be forced. On the third day, something changed. As David was leaving lunch by her door, he heard movement inside the room. Then, very quietly, came a single word, "Thank you." David's heart jumped. Her voice was clearer now, and that refined accent was unmistakable. This wasn't the voice of someone who had grown up on the streets. This was someone who had been educated, probably in expensive schools. "You're welcome," David replied gently. "My name is David. You don't have to tell me yours until you're ready." Several more days passed in silence. David began to worry that he had pushed too hard, too fast. But then, on a rainy Thursday evening, he heard her voice again through the door. "My name is Amelia," she said quietly. David sat down on the floor with his back against the door. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "How are you feeling, Amelia?" "Confused," she admitted. "Why did you bring me here? What do you want from me?" The pain in her voice nearly broke David's heart. "I don't want anything," he said honestly. "I just couldn't walk away and leave you in that place. I have a daughter about your age, and I kept thinking about how I would want someone to help her if she was in trouble." There was a long pause. Then Amelia spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had parents once too. They loved me very much. What happened to them?" David asked gently. Another long silence. David was about to apologize for asking when Amelia spoke again. "They were murdered," she said, her voice hollow, "along with my 2 younger brothers. I was supposed to die that night too, but someone decided I was worth more alive than dead." David's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a story of someone falling on hard times. This was something much darker and more serious. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew longer. Amelia would sit by the door, and David would sit on the other side. They never saw each other face to face, but slowly, she began to tell him pieces of her story. She had grown up in a palace, she said. Her father had been a king of a small but wealthy country. She remembered state dinners with important people from around the world, riding horses in vast gardens, and having tutors who taught her 6 different languages. "I was being prepared to rule someday," she told David one evening. "My father wanted me to understand economics, politics, and international relations. He said a good ruler must know how the world works." David researched everything Amelia told him. Late at night, while she slept, he would search the internet for news about missing royalty, political coups, and small kingdoms. What he found made his stomach turn. 3 years ago, the small oil-rich nation of Kholistan had experienced a violent military coup. The royal family had reportedly been killed during the fighting, and the king's brother had taken power, claiming he was restoring order to the country. David found old photos of the royal family online. In one formal portrait, he saw a young woman who looked remarkably like the person he imagined Amelia to be. The caption identified her as Princess Amelia of Kholistan, daughter of King Robert and heir to the throne. According to the official reports, Princess Amelia had died in the palace fire during the coup, but David now knew the truth was very different. She hadn't died at all. She had been taken, sold, and forced into a life of unimaginable suffering. The next evening, David shared what he had discovered. He heard Amelia crying softly on the other side of the door. "My uncle," she whispered. "It was my uncle who betrayed us. He wanted the throne for himself, but he knew that as long as I was alive, people would question his right to rule. So he made a deal with very bad people. They would take me away and make sure I could never return to claim what was rightfully mine." David felt anger burning in his chest. How could someone do that to their own family? How could anyone be so cruel and greedy? "He told everyone I was dead," Amelia continued. "But death would have been a mercy compared to what they did to me. They wanted to break my spirit completely, to make me forget who I really was." "But you didn't forget," David said softly. "No," Amelia replied with a strength in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I am Princess Amelia of Kholistan, daughter of King Robert, and I will not let them win." For the first time since bringing her home, David heard something in her voice that gave him hope. The broken girl was still there, but underneath was a woman who had been trained to lead a nation, and that woman was starting to remember who she really was. David stared at his laptop screen, reading the same news article for the 3rd time. The official story about Princess Amelia's death didn't match what he now knew to be true. His hands shook as he realized the full scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about saving one person anymore. This was about exposing a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. The next morning, David made a decision that would put both their lives at risk. He called his old friend Michael, a private investigator who specialized in international cases. They had known each other since college, and David trusted him completely. "I need your help with something very serious," David said over the phone. "But I can't tell you everything over the phone. Can you come to Bangkok?" Michael arrived 2 days later. When David explained the situation, his friend's face went pale. "David, do you understand what you're saying?" Michael asked. "If this woman really is Princess Amelia, then her uncle has been ruling a country illegally for 3 years. He has billions of dollars in oil money, a private army, and connections all over the world. If he finds out she's alive, he'll do anything to keep her quiet." "That's exactly why we need to be careful," David replied. "But we can't just do nothing. She deserves justice, and the people of Caliston deserve to know the truth." Meanwhile, Amelia was struggling with her own fears. The safety of David's apartment had given her time to think, and the memories were flooding back. She remembered the night her family died, the sound of gunshots, the smell of smoke, and the moment she realized her uncle had betrayed them all. "I keep having nightmares," she told David one evening as they sat on opposite sides of the door. "In my dreams, I see my little brothers calling for help, but I can't reach them. I was supposed to protect them, but I failed." "You were a victim too," David said gently. "There was nothing you could have done to save them. You were just a young woman against trained soldiers." "But I'm alive, and they're not," Amelia whispered. "Why me? Why did I survive when they didn't?" David didn't have an answer for that, but he knew that her survival might be the key to bringing down the people responsible for her family's death. Michael began his investigation carefully. He reached out to contacts in international law enforcement, human rights organizations, and investigative journalists. What he discovered was even worse than they had imagined. "This isn't just about Caliston," Michael told David during a secure phone call. "Your uncle isn't just a power-hungry ruler. He's been working with organized crime groups across Southeast Asia. The same network that took Amelia has been targeting other wealthy families, especially those with political connections." David felt sick. "How many others are there?" "We don't know yet," Michael replied. "But based on what I'm hearing, this could involve hundreds of victims over the past several years. Daughters of politicians, businessmen, even other royalty from smaller nations. They take them, break them down, and then either sell them or use them as leverage against their families." That night, David shared this information with Amelia. Her reaction surprised him. Instead of fear, he heard anger in her voice. "I should have known," she said. "My uncle was always jealous of my father. He felt he deserved the throne more because he was older. But my father was chosen by the people and the Council of Elders. Uncle Thomas never accepted that." "Thomas?" David asked. "That's your uncle's name, King Thomas I. He calls himself now," Amelia said with bitter sarcasm. "He's turned our beautiful country into a prison. I've been reading the news reports you showed me. People are afraid to speak out against him. The oil money that should help our citizens is being used to buy weapons and pay off corrupt officials." David could hear the pain in her voice, but also something else. The princess was emerging from the broken girl. The woman who had been trained to lead was remembering her duty to her people. "What do you want to do?" David asked. Amelia was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than he had ever heard it. "I want to fight back," she said. "Not just for me, but for everyone who has suffered because of his greed. For my brothers who died, for the other victims of this network, and for the people of Caliston who deserve better. But fighting back would be dangerous." Michael's research had revealed that Thomas had spies and hired criminals in cities around the world. The moment they made any public move, Amelia would become a target. "We need proof," Michael explained during his next visit. "Her word alone won't be enough. We need evidence of the network, financial records, witness testimonies from other survivors, and we need to be very careful about who we trust." David looked at Amelia, who had finally agreed to meet with Michael face to face. Even after everything she had been through, she carried herself with dignity. Her royal training was evident in the way she spoke, the way she listened, and the way she asked intelligent questions about their investigation. "I'm willing to take the risk," Amelia said firmly. "But I want to make sure that when we move, we're strong enough to win. I won't let my uncle destroy more lives just to protect his stolen throne." As they began planning their next steps, David realized that his quiet life was about to change forever. He had started this journey trying to save one person, but now, he was part of something much bigger. They were about to take on a king, a criminal network, and a conspiracy that spanned multiple countries. The hunt for justice was just beginning, and there would be no turning back. 3 months had passed since Michael joined their investigation. The evidence they had gathered was overwhelming, but also terrifying. The criminal network was far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined, with connections reaching into governments, police forces, and even international organizations. Amelia had grown stronger during this time. She spent hours each day working with David and Michael, helping them understand the political landscape of her homeland and identifying key players in her uncle's regime. Her memory was remarkable, and she could recall details about conversations and meetings from years ago that proved crucial to their investigation. I remember overhearing my uncle talking to a man named Victor, Amelia told them one afternoon. This was about 6 months before the coup. Victor had a thick Russian accent, and they were discussing something about expanding operations into Southeast Asia at the time. I thought they were talking about legitimate business. Michael's eyes lit up. Victor Petrov. We've been tracking him for years. He's one of the biggest operators in this type of criminal activity. If we can prove your uncle was working with him, we have a direct connection to the international network. But gathering evidence was dangerous work. Michael had to be extremely careful about who he contacted and how he approached potential witnesses. Several times they discovered that people they hoped would help them had mysteriously disappeared, or refused to talk out of fear. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young woman named Lisa, who worked for an international aid organization, reached out to Michael through a secure channel. She had been investigating missing persons cases across Southeast Asia and had noticed patterns that matched their research. I've been tracking similar cases for 2 years, Lisa explained during an encrypted video call. Young women from wealthy families who vanish without a trace. The official explanations never add up, and the investigations always get shut down. Quickly, Lisa had documented over 40 cases that fit the pattern. Some of the victims were daughters of politicians, others were from successful business families, and a few were from minor royal families like Amelia's. The common thread was that they all had value beyond just their personal wealth. They're not just taking these women for profit, Lisa explained. They're using them as leverage. Some families pay enormous ransoms and never see their daughters again. Others are forced to make political or business decisions to protect their missing family members. Amelia listened to this with growing horror and determination. That's exactly what my uncle did, she said. He didn't just want me gone so he could take the throne. He wanted to use me as a weapon against anyone who might oppose him. As long as people believed I was dead, no one would question his right to rule. The evidence was mounting, but they all knew that exposing the truth would put them in immediate danger. Thomas had spent 3 years consolidating his power, and he had resources they could barely imagine. He controlled the military, the police, and the courts in Khalistan. He also had connections to dangerous people in many other countries. We need to go public all at once, Michael said during one of their planning sessions. If we release the information slowly, they'll have time to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. We need to coordinate with multiple news organizations and law enforcement agencies simultaneously. But Amelia was struggling with the weight of what they were about to do. The closer they got to exposing the truth, the more she remembered about her old life. She would sit by the window for hours, staring out at the city and thinking about the family she had lost. Sometimes I wonder if this is what my father would have wanted, she confided to David one evening. He always taught me that a ruler's first duty is to protect their people. But what if fighting back just puts more innocent people in danger? David sat beside her, something that had become natural as she grew more comfortable with human contact. Your father sounds like he was a wise man, he said. But I think he would also want justice for what happened to his family. And I think he would be proud of how you're trying to protect other people from suffering the same fate. The decision to move forward came when they learned that the network was planning to expand their operations. Lisa had intercepted communications, suggesting that they were targeting a group of students from a prestigious international school. The attack was planned for the following month. We can't wait any longer, Amelia said firmly. If we don't act now, more families will be destroyed. I won't let that happen. Michael had been working with investigators in 6 different countries, carefully building a case that would be strong enough to survive the inevitable attempts to discredit it. They had financial records, witness testimonies, and most importantly, they had Amelia herself. Are you really ready for this? David asked her the night before they planned to go public. Once we release your story, there's no going back. Your life will never be private again, and you'll always be looking over your shoulder. Amelia nodded without hesitation. I've been living in fear for 3 years, she said. But now I have something more powerful than fear. I have hope. Hope that we can stop these people and give other victims a chance to reclaim their lives. The next morning they began the process that would change everything. Michael contacted his media allies. Lisa prepared her documentation of the other cases, and Amelia recorded a detailed video testimony that would serve as the centerpiece of their evidence. As David watched Amelia speak into the camera, telling her story with courage and dignity, he realized that the broken girl he had tried to save was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found her strength again, a leader who was ready to fight for justice no matter the cost. The network that had destroyed so many lives was about to face its greatest challenge, and it was being led by someone they had tried to break but had only made stronger. The world changed overnight. When the story broke simultaneously across 12 major news networks in 8 countries, it sent shockwaves through governments and criminal organizations alike. Amelia's video testimony, combined with the evidence Michael and Lisa had gathered, painted a clear picture of corruption and crime that reached the highest levels of power. Within hours, the story was trending on every social media platform. People couldn't believe that such a massive criminal network had operated in plain sight for so long. The hashtag #JusticeForAmelia began appearing in posts from around the world, as people shared their outrage and support. But the response from Thomas and his allies was swift and vicious. Within 6 hours of the story breaking, they released a statement claiming that Amelia was an imposter, that the real princess had died years ago, and that this was all part of a conspiracy to destabilize Colliston's government. They're trying to discredit everything we've worked for, Michael said as he monitored the news coverage from their secure location. David had moved them to a safe house outside Bangkok, knowing that their lives were now in serious danger. Amelia was surprisingly calm as she watched the counterattacks unfold. I expected this, she said. My uncle has spent 3 years building his narrative. He won't give up his stolen throne without a fight. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Journalists from around the world were trying to verify the story independently. International law enforcement agencies began coordinating their investigations. Most importantly, other victims and their families started coming forward with their own stories. Lisa's phone rang constantly as families who had lost daughters reached out, finally having hope that they might get answers. Some of the victims were still alive, hidden in various locations around the world. Others had tragically died, but their families finally knew the truth about what had happened. 37 families have contacted us in the past week, Lisa reported during one of their secure video calls. Some of them have been searching for their daughters for years. They're finally getting the closure they deserve. The international pressure on Thomas's government was enormous. Several countries froze assets belonging to him and his closest allies. The United Nations launched an investigation into human rights violations in Colliston. Most importantly, the people of Colliston began to demand answers. There are protests in the capital, Amelia said, reading the latest news reports with tears in her eyes. My people are finally standing up to him. They're carrying pictures of my family and demanding justice. But the victory came with a price. Thomas's supporters made several attempts to locate and silence Amelia. Their safe house was compromised twice, forcing them to move to new locations. David found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering if they were being followed. The stress was taking its toll on everyone, but especially on Amelia. The constant media attention and the pressure of being the key witness in such a massive case brought back memories of her trauma. Some nights, David would find her sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness. I never wanted to be famous, she told him one evening. I just wanted my family back. I wanted to go home to the life I had before all this happened. I know, David said softly, but look at what you've accomplished. Dozens of families now have hope because of your courage. You've exposed criminals who have hurt so many people. The breakthrough came when Viktor Petrov, the Russian criminal Michael had been tracking, was arrested in Switzerland. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison, he decided to cooperate with investigators. His testimony was devastating. He provided detailed information about the entire network, including financial records, the locations of hidden facilities, and most importantly, recorded conversations with Thomas planning various operations. Thomas is finished, Michael said after reviewing Petrov's evidence. There's no way he can deny his involvement now. The recordings are crystal clear. As the legal cases moved forward in multiple countries, Amelia faced a difficult decision. Several political groups in Colliston were asking her to return and reclaim her rightful place as queen. The people were calling for her to come home and lead them out of the darkness Thomas had created. "I don't know if I'm ready to be a queen," Amelia confided to David. "I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I've seen things and experienced things that have changed me forever." David understood her hesitation. The woman he had met in that warehouse was very different from the confident princess who was now speaking to world leaders and international investigators. She had grown stronger, but she had also learned how cruel the world could be. "Maybe that's exactly what makes you the right person to lead," David suggested. "You understand suffering in a way that most rulers never will. You know what it's like to lose everything and have to fight to get it back." In the end, Amelia made a decision that surprised everyone. She announced that she would not return to Colliston to reclaim the throne. Instead, she would establish an international foundation dedicated to helping victims of human trafficking and supporting the families of missing persons. "I've learned that true power isn't about wearing a crown or living in a palace," she said, during a press conference that was watched by millions of people around the world. "True power is about using your voice to help people who can't help themselves." Thomas was eventually arrested when he tried to flee Colliston with stolen oil revenues. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to life in prison for his crimes. The network he had helped build was dismantled, and dozens of his associates were arrested in coordinated raids across multiple countries. Most importantly, over 60 victims were rescued and reunited with their families. The foundation Amelia established helped them rebuild their lives and provided support for their recovery. David watched all of this unfold with a mixture of pride and sadness. He was proud of what Amelia had accomplished, but he knew that their strange journey together was coming to an end. She had found her purpose, and he had found something he thought he had lost forever after his wife's death: the ability to make a real difference in the world. "Thank you," Amelia said to him on the day she left for Geneva to officially launch her foundation. "You saved my life, but more than that, you helped me remember who I really am." David smiled. "You saved yourself," he replied. "I just gave you a safe place to heal." As he watched her plane take off, David realized that his own healing had been just as important as hers. He had come to Bangkok as a broken man, consumed by grief and loneliness. But in helping Amelia reclaim her life, he had found a new purpose for his own. The princess had become a protector of the innocent, and the man who had tried to save her had discovered that sometimes the person you're trying to help ends up saving you instead.